I still remember the sound of that knock. It was soft, hesitant, almost unsure, like a memory testing whether it still belonged here. For a moment, I didn't move. I just stood in the middle of my quiet living room, the evening sun stretching long shadows across the floor, and I stared at the door. My heart was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that only happens before a storm you've already lived through once before. It had been 20 years since my brother left home. 20 years since we spoke a full sentence to each other. And somehow, after all that silence, I knew it was him on the other side. I don't know how. Maybe it was the rhythm of the knock. Gentle, familiar, like the way he used to tap his pencil against the table when he was thinking. Maybe it was the hour, almost sunset, the same time he used to come home from school and yell, "I'm starving," before he even took off his shoes, but mostly I think it was my heart. Some part of me had been waiting all these years. Even when I told myself I'd moved on, I hadn't. I took a slow breath and walked toward the door. My fingers trembled as they touched the handle. Every step felt like walking through memories, the fights, the birthdays, the empty chair at family dinners, the letters I wrote but never sent. And when I finally opened the door, there he was, older, tired, thinner. But those same eyes, the same quiet brown eyes that used to look at me with mischief and warmth, were staring right back at me. For a long time, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, caught between the years that separated us and the childhood that still connected us. He was the first to smile. A small broken smile. The kind people give when they're not sure if they're allowed to. "Hey, sis," he said softly. His voice cracked a little, like it had forgotten how to say my name, and just like that, 20 years melted away. All the anger, the distance, the reasons we stopped talking, they didn't matter for a second. I just saw my brother standing in front of me again, but behind that relief, something else lingered. A shadow of the past. Because love doesn't erase history. And forgiveness doesn't come without remembering what broke you first. I wanted to hug him, but I didn't. Not yet. I just nodded, stepped aside, and whispered, "Come in." He looked uncertain, like he didn't know if he should. But he did. Slowly. And as the door closed behind him, the air between us filled with years of unsaid words. I could feel my chest tighten. There were 1,000 questions I wanted to ask. Where have you been? Why didn't you write? Do you ever think of home? But instead, I went to the kitchen and poured 2 cups of tea. That's how my mother used to solve everything, over tea. Maybe part of me believed it could still work. We sat at the same wooden table where we once argued about who got the last cookie, the same table where our father told us bedtime stories when the lights went out. And for the first time in 20 years, we were sitting there together again, strangers who shared the same blood. The clock ticked. The tea steamed. And I realized this moment wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of finally understanding what happened, of facing what we'd both run from. Because sometimes the people we love don't leave forever. They just lose their way for a while. And when they find their way back, it's up to us to decide. Do we open the door or keep it closed? That evening, I opened mine. And that simple choice changed everything. When people ask me about my childhood, I always say it was made of small things. Not grand moments or fancy trips. Just simple, warm things. The smell of my mother's cooking, the creak of our old wooden gate, the sound of my brother's laughter echoing through the narrow hallway of our house. We didn't have much, but we had each other. And somehow, that made everything feel full. My brother Daniel was 2 years younger than me. He was the kind of child who couldn't sit still. Always building something out of nothing. Cardboard forts, tiny paper boats, old radio parts. He saw magic in things most people would throw away. He used to follow me everywhere. When I went to school, he'd walk with me halfway, even though his school was in the opposite direction. When I did homework, he'd sit beside me, humming under his breath, pretending to help while actually doodling in my notebook. I remember one rainy afternoon when we were about 8 and 10. The power had gone out, and the whole house smelled like damp clothes and rain-soaked earth. Our parents were sitting by the window talking softly, and Daniel and I were lying on the floor watching the raindrops slide down the glass. He turned to me suddenly and said, "Do you think we'll always live together like this?" I laughed. "Of course we will. Why wouldn't we?" He smiled, satisfied, and said, "Good. because you're my best friend." That memory never left me. It was simple, innocent, but it became the anchor I held onto when everything later started to fall apart. Our father worked as a mechanic, often gone from sunrise to sunset. Our mother was the heart of the home, patient, gentle, with a smile that could calm any storm. She loved us equally, but she always said Daniel needed a bit more watching over. He had a wild spirit, full of curiosity, full of mistakes. And I was the opposite, careful, responsible. The one who cleaned up after his experiments and apologized to the neighbors when his soccer ball broke their window. We balanced each other. He brought laughter, I brought order. Together we made the house feel alive. But as we grew older, things began to shift. Our father started drinking more after losing his job. The laughter around our dinner table grew quieter. And our mother, though she tried to keep us together, looked more tired each day. Daniel took it harder than I did. He hated seeing her cry. He hated seeing Dad stumble in late at night, smelling like smoke and silence. One evening, when Daniel was around 16, he burst into my room. "He yelled at her again," he said angrily. "She didn't even do anything. I swear one day I'm going to leave this house." I told him not to talk like that. "Running away doesn't fix anything," I said, but he didn't listen. He never did when his heart was full of fire. Looking back, I realized he wasn't just angry. He was hurting. And I didn't see it clearly then. We finished school. I stayed home to help Mom and later started working at a small bakery nearby. Daniel, though, was restless. He wanted more, to go to the city, to make something of himself. The day he left, I helped him pack. Mom cried quietly in the kitchen. Dad barely looked up from his chair. And Daniel, he hugged me tight and said, "I'll come back soon. Just wait for me, okay?" I believed him. Every week I checked the mailbox, waiting for a letter. Sometimes one came. Short notes smudged with city dust. Got a job at a workshop. "It's hard here, but I'm trying. Tell Mom I'm okay." And then, one day the letters stopped. At first, I thought maybe he was just busy. But weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. And silence became a language I learned to live with. Mom kept his room just the way he left it. His tools, his posters, the old radio he tried to fix but never could. She'd dust it every Sunday, as if he might walk in any moment. Dad grew older and quieter. Regret changes people in ways you don't notice until it's too late. Sometimes, when I walked past Daniel's door, I'd hear echoes, laughter, arguments, the sound of our childhood still living somewhere inside those walls. I tried to move on. I got married for a while, though it didn't last. My husband was kind but distant. Maybe I was too. I was always waiting for something I couldn't explain. Like a part of my life had been paused, waiting for the rest to return. Mom passed away a few years later. In her final days, she still asked about Daniel. "He'll come home," she said softly, holding my hand. "When he's ready." And I promised her I'd wait. I didn't know that promise would stretch into 2 decades. 20 long years of birthdays missed, holidays spent alone, and moments where I almost forgot the sound of his voice. But I never stopped hoping. Every time the phone rang, every time I heard footsteps outside, some small, foolish part of me thought, maybe it's him. And then, one quiet evening, it finally was. That knock on the door, the same one I'd imagined 1,000 times, wasn't a dream anymore. But before we could talk about forgiveness, before we could understand what really happened, I had to face something first. The truth about why he left and why he stayed away so long. When Daniel left home, I told myself it was just for a little while. He'd find a job, settle in, and come back once things got better. That's what good brothers do. That's what he promised. But life doesn't always keep its promises. The first few months after he left, Mom and I would wait by the phone every Sunday. She'd sit by the window, her apron still on, as if she didn't want to miss the ring. I'd keep the teapot ready like we could pour him a cup through the wires if he called. Sometimes he did. His voice was cheerful, full of plans and hope. He'd talk about the city lights, his new job at a repair shop, how he was finally getting somewhere. Mom would laugh and say, "I told you he'd make it." And I'd smile too, though deep inside, I missed him more with every call. But as the years went by, those calls became shorter, then less frequent, until one day they stopped altogether. I tried to reach him. The number changed. Letters went unanswered. Once, I even asked one of his old friends in town if they'd heard from him. They hadn't. It felt like shouting into a void. You send your love out into the world, and it just never comes back. One winter evening, maybe 3 years after he left, I got a letter. It wasn't from Daniel, it was from a woman. Her handwriting was neat, unfamiliar. She wrote, "Hello, this is Clara. I work with Daniel at the shop. I thought you should know he's been going through a hard time. Things aren't easy here. He doesn't like to talk about it, but I thought you should know he's okay. Just lost right now." Lost. That word hit me harder than I expected. I showed the letter to Mom, and for the first time, she didn't say anything. She just pressed the paper to her chest and whispered, "As long as he's alive." From that day, something in her changed. She smiled less. She prayed more. Every night, before going to bed, she'd whisper his name like a prayer, as if it might carry across the miles and reach him. Dad didn't talk about Daniel at all. He'd change the subject every time. Maybe it was pride, maybe guilt, but I could see the regret behind his silence, and me. I started to feel angry. Not at Daniel exactly, but at the emptiness he left behind. Why didn't he write? Why couldn't he just call? Didn't he know how much we missed him? Sometimes I'd stand outside, staring at the road, half expecting to see him walking toward the house. I'd imagine what I'd say when he finally came back. But as the years dragged on, those imagined conversations turned into arguments. "Why did you leave us like that? How could you stay away for so long?" I'd replay them in my head until I fell asleep, tears soaking my pillow, anger tangled with love. The next time I heard Daniel's name, it wasn't from him. It was from someone who worked in town, an old family friend who came to the bakery one morning. "I saw your brother in the city," he said almost casually. He looked well. He was with a woman. A foreigner, I think, pretty, looked happy. I froze. He didn't mean to hurt me, but those words felt like a knife twisting gently. All this time, while Mom was lighting candles and whispering his name, he was out there smiling with someone else. I nodded politely, thanked the man, and went back to kneading dough. But that night when I got home, I broke down in the kitchen. Mom tried to comfort me. "Maybe that's good," she said softly. "Maybe he found someone who makes him happy." But I couldn't stop the bitterness from rising. Happy? He couldn't even tell us he's alive, and you think that's happiness? I regretted saying it the moment it left my mouth. Mom just looked at me, not angry, not hurt, just tired. "He'll come home," she whispered, "when the time is right." But the time never seemed right. 2 years later, Mom fell ill. It was slow at first. Tiredness, small coughs, forgotten things. But soon she could barely leave her bed. I wrote Daniel again. 4 letters, all sent to the last address I had. No reply. When the doctor said she didn't have much time, I tried one last thing. I called the workshop number I'd kept in an old notebook. A young man answered. "Daniel?" "Is he still there?" I asked. There was a pause. Then the voice said, "Daniel left months ago. Sorry." That was all. No explanation. No forwarding address. Just a click. I sat by the window that night, watching the lights flicker in the distance. Somewhere out there, my brother was alive, and we were living 2 completely different lives, separated by choices and silence. When Mom passed away, I wanted to be angry at him. I wanted to curse his name for not being there. But instead, when I saw her peaceful face, I remembered her last words. "He'll come home when he's ready." So I stayed silent. And I kept waiting. Years passed. I grew older. The bakery closed. Dad died a few winters later. Life became smaller, quieter, and still, no sign of Daniel. I used to talk to him in my mind sometimes. When I made tea, I'd say, "You always wanted 2 spoons of sugar, didn't you?" When I passed the old photo of us on the mantel, I'd whisper, "Where are you now?" I didn't know then that he had been carrying his own pain too, guilt, loss, and shame that kept him from coming home. But I'd learn that later. For now, all I knew was the silence he left behind. The last letter I ever wrote to him was simple. I didn't even expect him to read it. "Dear Daniel, I hope you're well. Mom is gone, Dad too. I'm still here. The same old house, the same old door. If you ever need a place to come back to, you'll find me here. Love, your sister." I never mailed that one. It stayed in my drawer for 20 years, folded neatly beside a photo of us as children, him holding a toy airplane, me laughing beside him, and that's how the years went by. quiet, uneventful, stitched together by small routines and unspoken memories, until that one evening when I heard the knock. The knock that sounded like a heartbeat I'd been missing. I didn't know why he had come back. Not yet, but I was about to find out. The steam from the tea had gone cold by the time either of us spoke. Daniel sat across from me, hands wrapped around the cup like it was something to hold on to. Something real. His shoulders were tense. His eyes moved around the room, lingering on every small thing that hadn't changed. The framed photograph of Mom on the mantel. The old curtains. The chipped table. "I can't believe it's all still here," he said quietly. "I didn't have a reason to change it," I replied. My voice came out softer than I expected. He nodded, eyes down. "It feels smaller somehow. Maybe we just got older." He smiled a little. That same crooked half-smile he used to give me when we were kids. It faded as quickly as it appeared. For a few minutes, we just listened to the clock ticking on the wall. Tick, tick, tick. Each sound seemed to count the years between us. Then I finally asked what had been sitting in my chest all this time. "Why, Daniel? Why didn't you ever come back?" He didn't look up. Instead, he ran his fingers along the rim of his teacup, tracing small circles like he was trying to find the right words there. "I wanted to," he said after a long pause. "So many times. But every time I thought about it, something inside me stopped me. I'd tell myself next month. Maybe next month." And somehow 20 years passed. I felt a dull ache in my chest. "That's not an answer." He exhaled, slow, heavy. "You're right," he said. "You deserve more than that." He leaned back, staring at his hands. When I left home, I thought I was doing the right thing. Things were bad back then. Dad drinking, Mom crying, me fighting with him every night. I thought if I left, it would make things easier for everyone. I didn't want you to get caught in the middle anymore. "You didn't make things easier," I whispered. "I know," he said quietly. "I made them worse." He took another breath, and his voice softened. Older now, like a man who'd been carrying too much for too long. "I found work pretty quickly. At first, things were good. I sent letters, remember?" I nodded, but then the shop closed. The owner disappeared overnight, owing everyone months of wages. I couldn't come home. I didn't even have the money for the bus. I tried to find other work, but it was hard. I did what I could. Odd jobs, repairs, whatever people needed. He stopped and laughed bitterly. "You know what's funny? I kept telling myself I'd send a big package home one day to show you I made it. That I wasn't a failure. But life doesn't wait for you to be ready. It just keeps moving." He looked up at me then, eyes glassy. "I met someone, Clara. She was kind, patient. She believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. We tried to build a life together." I remembered the name. "The letter. That woman wrote to us once," I said softly. "She said you were lost." He smiled sadly. "She wasn't wrong." He rubbed his thumb against his wedding band. Or maybe it used to be one. "She got sick, cancer. I spent everything trying to save her. Sold my tools, my motorbike, everything. When she died, I felt like the world stopped. After that, I couldn't face home. I thought maybe I didn't deserve to." My breath caught. "You didn't even come for Mom's funeral." His eyes filled with tears. "I know, I wanted to. God, I wanted to. I got on the bus that morning, halfway here, and I got off before it reached town. I sat at the station for hours. I just couldn't walk up that road. I was too ashamed." "Of what?" I asked, my voice trembling. He looked up, and there it was, the truth in his eyes. Of being the son who broke her heart. The words hung in the air between us. For years, I'd imagined yelling at him, telling him how much he'd hurt us. But now, sitting across from the man he'd become, tired, broken, trying, I couldn't do it. Instead, I just whispered, "She never stopped waiting." He nodded slowly, tears spilling over. I know, I felt it. Even when I was far away, I felt it. He reached into his jacket pocket then and pulled out something small. Folded, old, and worn thin. He placed it on the table between us. It was a letter. My letter. The one I never mailed. I stared at it, speechless. "I found it," he said quietly. Clara had kept some of my things. I think it must have gotten mixed up with the ones I sent. After she passed, I went through the box and found it there, unopened, yellowed at the edges. When I read it, that's when I knew I had to come back. I opened it, my hands shaking. The paper was creased, but the words were still clear. My handwriting, the ink faded but familiar. If you ever need a place to come back to, you'll find me here. I looked up at him. You came because of this? He nodded. Because of you. The tears I'd been holding back finally came. They weren't loud or dramatic, just soft, steady streams that carried years of silence away. We talked for hours that night. About Mom, about Dad, about the years that shaped us apart. He told me about the city, the nights he slept in a workshop, the people who helped him, the mistakes he made, the loneliness that followed him everywhere. I kept thinking about this house, he said. I used to dream I'd walk through that door and hear you laugh again. But every time I tried to imagine it, it hurt too much. Like I didn't deserve it anymore. I reached across the table and touched his hand. It felt rough, cold, like the hands of someone who had worked too hard and held too much pain. You always deserved to come home, I said softly. You just forgot how. He laughed quietly, wiping his eyes. You always did know what to say. We sat in silence after that. Not awkward, but peaceful. The kind of silence that heals instead of hurts. The rain had started outside, light, steady. It sounded like forgiveness. Later that night, after he'd gone to bed in his old room, I walked around the house. Every corner seemed different now, lighter somehow. It wasn't that the past was gone. It never would be. But something had shifted. I paused at Mom's photo on the mantel. She was right, I whispered. You did come home. I swear I could almost hear her voice. Soft, warm, full of that quiet faith she always had. And in that moment, I realized something important. Forgiveness isn't a single moment. It's a choice you make again and again, every time the memory of pain tries to pull you back. The next morning, I found Daniel standing in the garden, looking at the old lemon tree we'd planted as kids. It's still here, he said. It never stopped growing, I told him. He smiled, and for the first time, I saw a bit of the boy I'd grown up with. The one who used to make paper boats, the one who promised we'd always be together. He turned to me and said, I don't expect things to go back to how they were. They won't, I said. But they can start again, he nodded. I'd like that. And then, slowly, quietly, I hugged him. After 20 years of waiting, the space between us finally closed. He held me tightly and I felt him tremble. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The past had already said enough. I don't think I'll ever forget that morning light. It was soft, golden, and gentle, filtering through the thin curtains like a shy guest. The house smelled of ginger tea, and my hands were trembling slightly as I poured 2 cups. One for me, one for him, my brother. After 20 years of silence, he was finally home. He sat quietly at the kitchen table, the same wooden one our father built decades ago. His hands were larger now, rougher, his hair touched with gray. But his eyes, those same deep brown eyes, still looked like the boy who used to steal mangoes from the neighbor's tree. For a while, neither of us spoke. The only sounds were the clink of spoons and the faint hum of the morning birds outside. Then he said softly, You still drink it without sugar. I smiled, my heart suddenly lighter. And you still talk too much before you taste yours. He laughed. It was the kind of laugh I hadn't heard in years, the kind that used to echo through our childhood home when things were simple, when love didn't need words. He told me about his years away, how life never quite felt right after he left, how every family dinner he missed haunted him, and how pride kept him from coming back sooner. He said, Every time I packed my bags to return, I stopped at the door. I thought maybe you'd still be angry. I looked at him, tears blurring my vision. I was never angry, Ravi. I was just waiting. He lowered his eyes, silent for a long time. Waiting, he repeated. You always were the patient one. That word, waiting, carried so much of my life inside it. Waiting for birthdays that went uncalled. Waiting for letters that never came. Waiting for forgiveness I never needed to give. Later that afternoon, we walked through the house together. The walls were lined with old photographs, family vacations, our parents' anniversary, the 2 of us standing beside a bicycle, grinning with missing teeth. He paused in front of one photo. Both of us as children, holding hands, our faces smeared with birthday cake. He touched the frame gently. "I missed this," he whispered. I swallowed hard. "You missed growing old with me, that's what you missed." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I can start catching up." That evening, the sun dipped low, painting everything in orange and gold. We sat on the porch, watching the neighborhood children play cricket in the street. The sound of their laughter filled the air, reminding us of the years we lost. "You know," I said quietly, "I used to imagine this moment. You coming back, saying sorry, and us pretending none of it happened. And is that what we're doing now?" He asked. "No," I said, looking at him. "We're doing something better. We're accepting what did happen, and loving each other anyway." He nodded slowly, and for the first time I saw peace in his face. Not the forced kind that hides pain, but the real kind. The one that grows when you finally forgive yourself. A week later, we visited our parents' graves together. The grass had grown tall, and the air smelled of earth and rain. Ravi knelt down, touching the cool stone. "I hope they forgive me," he said. "They already did," I replied softly. "They forgave you the day you were born." We stood there in silence, the kind that says more than words ever could. I placed a small garland of jasmine between the two headstones, and as the wind brushed past us, I swear I felt something warm, like a quiet blessing. That night, he stayed over. I gave him the old guest room, the one that used to be his before he left. When I peeked in later, he was asleep, the same way he used to sleep as a boy, one hand under the pillow, one leg dangling off the bed. For a moment, time folded in on itself. He was my little brother again, dreaming of nothing but tomorrow. I stood there quietly, a lump forming in my throat. There were so many years we could never get back, but standing there, I realized something powerful. Love doesn't keep time the way we do. It doesn't measure by birthdays missed or calls unanswered. Love waits, it bends, it forgives, and sometimes it knocks on your door after 20 years and says, "I'm home." The next morning, I woke up to the smell of breakfast. He was in the kitchen humming the same old song our mother used to sing while cooking. The table was set, the tea was ready, and he looked at me with a sheepish grin. "I burned the first batch of toast," he said. I laughed. Some things never change. We ate together, quietly, gratefully. And as I looked at him, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at the past. Not at the years we lost. Not at him, because sometimes the heart doesn't need explanations. It just needs to be heard. And he was finally here, sitting across from me, listening. A few months later, he found a small apartment nearby. Every Sunday, he'd come over for tea. Sometimes we talked for hours. Other times, we just sat in silence, letting the years slowly heal. He started bringing me small gifts, a plant for the windowsill, a new teacup, an old photograph he found in his suitcase. He said he wanted to make up for lost time, but I told him he already had. "You came back," I said. "That's enough," he smiled, that same boyish grin. "Still forgiving too easily." "Still making it too easy to forgive," I replied. As time went on, the pain softened into something gentler, something almost beautiful. People often talk about closure, like it's a moment that happens all at once. But I think it's more like the morning sun. It rises slowly, quietly, until one day you realize the shadows aren't so dark anymore. That's what forgiveness felt like for me. Not a single act, but a slow, unfolding sunrise in my heart. A year after he came back, on the anniversary of our parents' passing, we held a small prayer at home. Just the two of us. He lit the candles and I placed 2 small bowls of rice and flowers on the altar. As the flames flickered, I whispered, "They would be proud of us, Ravi." He looked at me, his voice trembling. "No, I'm proud of you, Didi. You kept our family alive even when it fell apart." I smiled through my tears. "I just did what love taught me to do. Wait." He reached across the table, took my hand, and squeezed it gently. "I'm not leaving again," he said. Not this time. And I believed him, not because of his words, but because of the peace in his eyes. Now, when I think about that day, the day my brother finally knocked on my door, I don't remember the sound of the knock itself. I remember the quiet after, the moment my heart knew that everything somehow had come full circle. Sometimes life takes us far apart so we can understand what truly matters. And sometimes it brings us back, not to fix the past, but to remind us that love never really leaves. It just waits for us to open the door. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about remembering with peace, and family, no matter how broken or distant, always finds its way home, one quiet knock at a time. So if someone you love is far away, in distance, in pride, or in silence, keep the light on. Because one day when you least expect it, they might come back. And when they do, you'll realize that love was never gone. It was just waiting on the other side of the door,